Welcome to this journey through one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Tallulah. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're hearing this narration. We're interested in knowing which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. The year was 1852, when the Bogard plantation stood proud among the cotton fields of Madison Parish, Louisiana. Just 4 miles east of Tallulah, along what is now Highway 65, the sprawling estate was considered the crown jewel of the parish. The main house, with its 12 imposing white columns, overlooked 600 acres of land where dozens of enslaved people toiled from dawn until dusk. Local records from the Madison Parish Courthouse indicate that the Bogard family owned 48 individuals, catalogued by first names only in the property ledger dated January 1852. If you're enjoying the story and feel like helping the channel with any amount, please support us by clicking the thanks button and donating whatever you wish. This really helps the channel keep posting new stories. Among those names was Marcus, described in the ledger as male, approximately 30 years of age, exceptionally skilled carpenter, valued at $1,800. What the ledger did not mention was that Marcus Kane had taught himself to read by listening to the Bogard children's lessons through open windows, memorizing the sounds of letters and practicing with discarded newspapers in the secrecy of night. His knowledge remained hidden, for literacy among the enslaved was forbidden by Louisiana law and punishable by 39 lashes. According to a journal discovered during courthouse renovations in 1965, the events that would forever alter the Bogard legacy began on a particularly humid evening in late August. The journal, believed to belong to Eliza Bogard, the 22-year-old unmarried daughter of plantation owner Thomas Bogard, contained encrypted entries using a simple substitution cipher. When deciphered by Professor Emmett Wilson of Tulane University, the entries revealed a clandestine relationship that defied the strict social codes of antebellum Louisiana. What follows is a reconstruction of events based on Eliza's journal, parish records, newspaper clippings from the Madison Journal, and oral histories collected by the Works Progress Administration during the 1930s. Some names have been changed, and certain details remain unclear. This is not just a story of disappearance, but of the silence that sometimes speaks louder than words. The Bogard household operated with clockwork precision. Thomas Bogard, a widower since 1847, managed the plantation with an iron fist and cold efficiency. His reputation in Tallulah and the surrounding areas was that of a businessman who valued order above all. The household staff consisted of 7 enslaved individuals who maintained the main house. The property's workforce was divided between field hands and skilled laborers, with Marcus Kane occupying a unique position as the head carpenter responsible for maintaining and expanding the plantation's structures. Former slave narratives collected in Madison Parish describe Thomas Bogard as neither the cruelest nor the kindest master. One account states, "Mr. Bogard didn't take pleasure in punishment like some did, but he never hesitated neither. He saw himself as a man of principles, and those principles never bent, not even a little." Eliza Bogard had returned to the plantation in April of 1852, after spending 4 years at the Nashville Female Academy in Tennessee. According to correspondence between Thomas Bogard and his sister Caroline, preserved in the Louisiana State Archives, Eliza's education was intended to prepare her for an advantageous marriage. A letter dated February 1852 reads, "Caroline, I have invested considerably in Eliza's refinement and expect it to yield dividends through a proper match. Judge Holloway's son has expressed interest, and at 32, William Holloway would provide both stability and connection to one of the finest families in the parish." What Thomas Beauregard could not have anticipated was his daughter's transformation during her years away. The journal entries from May through July 1852 reveal a young woman increasingly uncomfortable with plantation life. On May 12th, she wrote, "Father speaks of these people as one might speak of horses or furniture. I find I can no longer view the world through his eyes, though I dare not say so. The academy exposed me to ideas that would horrify him, books smuggled between girls after lights out, discussions of Wollstonecraft, and even whispers of abolition sentiment. I must guard my tongue carefully here. The tension between Eliza's evolving worldview and her father's rigid expectations created a household atmosphere that multiple sources describe as stifling. The family's longtime cook, Sarah, told WPA interviewers in 1937 that Miss Eliza came back different. She wasn't mean before, but she was a Beauregard through and through. When she came back, something had changed. She would look people in the eye when she spoke to them. Mr. Beauregard noticed, and it worried him something fierce. According to Eliza's journal, her first meaningful interaction with Marcus Kane occurred in early June when Thomas Beauregard commissioned a new writing desk for his daughter's bedroom. The construction required several days of work inside the main house, a rare occurrence that brought Marcus into the domestic sphere, typically separated from the work areas of the plantation. On June 7th, Eliza wrote, "Father has assigned the carpenter to craft a desk for my correspondence. He works with remarkable precision, his hands moving as if they possess their own intelligence. When Father left us alone momentarily, he glanced at the book on my bedside table. There was recognition in his eyes. I am almost certain of it, though we did not exchange words." The book, later identified in the journal as Jane Eyre, would become a secret signal between them. 2 days later, Eliza noted finding the volume moved slightly, open to a passage where Jane declares, "I am a free human being with an independent will." The implication that Marcus had read the text, an act of tremendous risk, marked the beginning of their clandestine communication. Throughout late June and July, the journal documents increasingly bold exchanges. Eliza began leaving scraps of paper with quotations from her books, hidden within the desk's partially completed drawers. Marcus would respond by rearranging the papers, sometimes adding small marks that, when connected, formed letters. The intellectual connection between them evolved into something deeper, evidenced by Eliza's increasingly emotional entries. On July 25th, she wrote in cipher, "We spoke today. Actually spoke. The house was empty save for Sarah in the kitchen, and he was repairing the loose banister on the east staircase. He knows more about literature than most of the girls at the academy. He taught himself by listening, watching, stealing moments with discarded newspapers and books. His mind is extraordinary. I feel as though I have discovered a hidden library in what I had been told was an empty field." The atmosphere in Tallulah during the summer of 1852 was particularly tense. According to articles in the Madison Journal, rumors of slave unrest had been circulating throughout the parish. A neighboring plantation had discovered evidence of what they believed to be escape plans, resulting in harsh crackdowns across the region. The parish patrol, a volunteer force of white men who monitored slave movements, doubled their rounds. Enslaved individuals found outside their plantations without proper passes faced severe punishment. It was against this backdrop that Eliza and Marcus continued their dangerous association. The journal entries from early August suggest they had begun meeting at night in the plantation's library when the household was asleep. Eliza would leave a lamp burning low in the window as a signal that it was safe to enter through the rarely used side door near Thomas Beauregard's study. During these forbidden conversations, they apparently shared their histories and dreams. Marcus revealed that he had a wife named Naomi who had been sold to a plantation near Vicksburg 3 years earlier, and a son he had never met. Eliza confessed her growing disillusionment with the society she had been raised to accept without question. On August 15th, Eliza wrote, "We spoke of freedom tonight, not just his, but mine as well. Are we not both confined by circumstances beyond our control? The boundaries of my cage may be gilded and spacious, but they are boundaries nonetheless. M speaks of a place in the north where we might both find what we seek, though in different forms. The thought should terrify me. Instead, I feel more alive than I have ever been." The exact nature of their plan remains unclear, but subsequent entries suggest they intended to flee north via the Mississippi River. Eliza mentioned contacts in Memphis and friends of friends with a boat. She had begun secretly converting her jewelry into cash through an unnamed intermediary in Vicksburg. Marcus, with his carpentry skills, was evidently constructing a hidden compartment in the writing desk to conceal money and necessary documents. On August 27th, the journal recorded, "3 days until we depart. Father leaves for New Orleans on business, which provides our opportunity. I will claim illness to avoid accompanying him. Everything is prepared. The money is secured. M has obtained the necessary papers through channels he will not reveal to protect those who helped him. I am terrified and exhilarated in equal measure." The entry for August 28th is brief. "Something is wrong. Father's manner has changed. He watches me with suspicious eyes. Has someone betrayed us? M. Failed to appear at our meeting place tonight." The next entry, dated August 29th, was the last in Eliza's journal. "They took him. They took him last night. Father says nothing to me directly, but I overheard him speaking with the overseer about a problem being handled. When I asked about M's absence, I was told he had been sent to repair fences on the far side of the property. I know this to be untrue. Sarah's eyes were red this morning. She will not look at me. Something terrible has happened. I must know what they've done." Here, Eliza's journal ends abruptly. What happened in the following days has been pieced together from multiple sources, none entirely reliable on their own, but which together form a disturbing mosaic. According to courthouse records, Thomas Beauregard reported his daughter missing on September 2nd, 1852. The Madison Journal published a brief notice on September 5th. "The daughter of prominent planter Thomas Beauregard has disappeared from the family home under mysterious circumstances. Miss Eliza Beauregard, 22, was last seen retiring to her room on the evening of August 30th. A search of the surrounding area has been organized. Foul play is not suspected at this time." Subsequent issues of the paper document the expanding search and growing concern. Volunteers from throughout Madison Parish combed the swamplands east of Tallulah. Bloodhounds were brought in from Vicksburg. A reward of $500 was offered for information leading to Eliza's safe return. Conspicuously absent from these reports is any mention of Marcus Kane. Parish records show that on September 1st, Thomas Beauregard registered the sale of one male slave carpenter to a buyer in New Orleans. The record is unusual in its lack of detail, omitting the buyer's name and the sale price, both standard information in such transactions. The official conclusion, as reported in the Madison Journal on October 10th, was that Eliza Beauregard had likely become disoriented and wandered into the swamp, where she met with an unfortunate accident. The search was officially called off, though no body was ever recovered. Thomas Beauregard never remarried and died in 1864 during the Union occupation of Louisiana. The plantation passed to his nephew, as he had no son, and was eventually subdivided and sold to several families after the Civil War. The main house burned under mysterious circumstances in 1871. Today, nothing remains of the original structures. What truly happened to Eliza Beauregard and Marcus Kane? The most compelling theory comes from an unexpected source. During oral history collections in the 1930s, An elderly woman named Josephine Taylor, living in a small community outside Memphis, Tennessee, shared a story passed down in her family. Josephine claimed to be the granddaughter of a woman named Elizabeth, who arrived in Memphis in the fall of 1852 with a man she introduced as her husband, Matthew. They were assisted by abolitionists connected to the Underground Railroad and eventually settled in Ohio. According to Josephine, her grandmother rarely spoke of her past, but kept a small wooden box carved with magnolia flowers, a flower prominently featured in descriptions of the Bogard plantation gardens. Inside the box was a gold locket containing the portrait of a stern-looking man and a scrap of paper with a quote from Jane Eyre. "I am no bird, and no net ensnares me. I am a free human being with an independent will." The WPA interviewer noted this story as likely apocryphal, and no further investigation was conducted at the time. The interview notes were filed away and largely forgotten until 1968, when Professor Wilson discovered them while researching Eliza's deciphered journal. If Josephine Taylor's account is true, it suggests a different fate for Eliza and Marcus. Rather than becoming victims of Thomas Beauregard's wrath or the dangerous swamplands around Tallulah, they may have successfully escaped north. The falsified sale record could have been Thomas Beauregard's attempt to explain Marcus's absence without revealing the humiliating truth that his daughter had chosen to flee with an enslaved man. But this theory leaves important questions unanswered. What about Marcus's wife and child in Vicksburg? Would he have abandoned them? And if Eliza and Marcus did escape, why did she never attempt to access her inheritance after emancipation or her father's death? The substantial Beauregard estate was eventually divided among distant relatives, who could not have legally prevented her claim had she been alive to make it. An alternative and darker theory emerged in 1967 when construction workers excavating for a highway expansion near the former Beauregard property uncovered human remains. According to the medical examiner's report, the skeleton belonged to a male of African descent, approximately 30 years of age. The remains showed evidence of trauma consistent with a violent death. Notably, the skeleton was found with iron carpentry tools, suggesting the individual may have been a craftsman. The location of the burial, shallow, unmarked, and on the periphery of what would have been Beauregard land, is consistent with how an enslaved person who had met with a violent end might have been disposed of. However, no conclusive identification was ever made, and after brief mention in local papers, the discovery faded from public attention. The remains were eventually reburied in an unmarked grave in the Tallulah cemetery. As for Eliza, no physical evidence of her fate has ever been discovered. No grave bears her name. No record of her appears after August 30th, 1852. It is as if she simply ceased to exist. What we are left with is silence, the silence of historical records that often omit more than they preserve, the silence of voices deliberately silenced, and the silence of a community that may have chosen not to see what was before them. The woods around what was once the Beauregard plantation are quiet now. The cotton fields have given way to other crops. The swamp that may have claimed Eliza's life or provided cover for her escape remains largely unchanged, its dark waters keeping whatever secrets were entrusted to them over 170 years ago. Local residents occasionally report a strange phenomenon near the site where the Beauregard house once stood. On particularly humid evenings in late August, some claim to hear what sounds like a woman's voice calling a name that is carried away by the wind before it can be clearly distinguished. Historians dismiss such stories as folklore typical of the region. Yet for some, the mystery of what happened on that August night in 1852 continues to resonate. A reminder of a time when the boundaries between freedom and captivity, love and propriety, life and death were drawn with lines both rigid and fragile. In 1968, all materials related to the case, Eliza's journal, parish records, newspaper clippings, and Professor Wilson's research notes, were archived at Tulane University's special collections. According to library records, a graduate student researching antebellum interracial relationships requested access to these materials in 1969. The student, whose name has been redacted from library records, reportedly abandoned her dissertation shortly afterward and left the university without explanation. The curator who assisted her later claimed that the student had become increasingly agitated while reviewing the materials, insisting that pages were missing from Eliza's journal, specifically pages that might have revealed the final moments before her disappearance. When asked how she could know that pages were missing from a journal she had never seen before, the student allegedly replied, "Because I've dreamed about them." The collection was microfilmed in 1969 and the originals placed in climate-controlled storage. During a cataloging project in 1967, library staff noted that Eliza's journal could not be located, though the microfilm copies remained available. The journal's current whereabouts are unknown. Perhaps the truth of what happened to Eliza Beauregard and Marcus Kane lies somewhere between the lines of faded documents and family stories, in the spaces where official history falls silent. Or perhaps it remains where it has always been, in the dark waters of the Madison Parish swamps, in the foundations of houses long since burned to ash, in the whispers that sometimes seem to carry on the humid air of a Louisiana August evening. Some secrets, it seems, prefer to remain secrets. And sometimes the silence itself is the story. The land where the Beauregard plantation once stood is now private property. The current owners have reported no unusual occurrences and have denied requests to conduct archaeological surveys. The unmarked grave in the Tallulah cemetery has no visitors. The microfilm copies of Eliza's journal gather dust in university archives, rarely requested. But each year, on August 30th, someone leaves a copy of Jane Eyre open to the page, where Jane declares herself a free human being with an independent will on the steps of the Madison Parish courthouse. The books disappear by morning. Local officials have installed cameras to identify the individual responsible, but the footage invariably shows only an indistinct figure approaching in pre-dawn darkness. And so the mystery remains, neither fully forgotten nor truly remembered, suspended in that strange liminal space where history meets legend. What actually happened to Eliza Beauregard and Marcus Kane on that August night in 1852? Perhaps it is better that we do not know with certainty. Some shadows are meant to remain unexplored, some voices meant to continue their whispers just beyond the range of clear hearing. After all, the most disturbing mysteries are not those that shock us with their revelations, but those that force us to question what we thought we knew about history, about human nature, about the silences that persist long after those who created them have turned to dust. The road that now runs past where the Beauregard plantation once stood is busy during daylight hours. But locals know that at night, especially in late August, when the air hangs heavy with humidity and the cicadas fall suddenly silent, it is better to take the longer route around. Not because of what might be seen, but because of what might be heard. A woman's voice calling a name, a sound like someone running through underbrush. And then, nothing but silence. A silence that somehow seems louder than any scream could ever be. In that silence, perhaps, lies the true horror of what happened in Tallulah in 1852, not in what we know, but in all that remains forever beyond our knowing. In 1962, a historian named Dr. Rachel Montgomery from Columbia University began researching the socio-economic impact of the Civil War on Madison Parish. During her investigation, she uncovered taxation records indicating that Thomas Beauregard's financial situation had deteriorated significantly in the months following Eliza's disappearance. By March 1853, he had sold 12 enslaved individuals, an unusual move for a plantation owner unless facing severe financial strain. More curious still was a bank draft discovered among Beauregard's business correspondence, dated October 5, 1852. The draft, made out to cash for the sum of $2,000, bore a notation, "Final payment as agreed." No recipient was named, and no explanation for the substantial withdrawal was provided in any of Beauregard's meticulous accounting ledgers. Dr. Montgomery's research notes, preserved in the Columbia University archives, contain a provocative speculation. The timing and secrecy surrounding this payment suggests a connection to his daughter's disappearance. Was this money used to suppress information, to facilitate a cover-up, or perhaps as payment to individuals who assisted in some more sinister resolution to the Eliza problem? An interview conducted with 97-year-old Benjamin Carter in 1963 adds another layer to this theory. Carter, whose grandparents had been enslaved on a neighboring plantation, recounted a story passed down in his family. "My granddaddy told me about a night when men rode out from the Beauregard place. Not the regular patrol, but men brought in special from out of town. They carried torches and traveled east toward the river. They returned before dawn. Nobody ever spoke of what happened, but 3 days later, the master announced that Miss Beauregard had gone missing." Carter's testimony cannot be independently verified, and at his advanced age, the reliability of his recollection might be questioned. Yet it aligns with an overlooked detail in the parish records, the registration of 5 unknown men at the Tallulah Inn on the night of August 29, 1852. They departed early on August 30th, leaving no record of their business in the area. The river Carter mentioned flows northeast of where the Beauregard plantation stood, eventually joining the Mississippi. In the 1850s, this area was particularly desolate, comprising dense swampland rarely traversed, except by those intimately familiar with its geography. It would have been an ideal location to dispose of evidence, or bodies. A land survey conducted in 1958 for a proposed drainage project noted an unusual depression approximately 300 yards from the river's edge. The surveyors described it as possibly man-made, rectangular in shape, measuring approximately 8 feet by 4 feet. The project was later abandoned due to funding constraints, and no excavation of the site was ever undertaken. Dr. Montgomery attempted to secure permission to investigate this location in 1964, but was denied access by the landowner, a descendant of one of Tallulah's founding families. Her research notes express frustration at this roadblock. "One cannot help but wonder what secrets lie buried in that swamp. The resistance I've encountered from local authorities and property owners suggests a community-wide reluctance to disturb certain aspects of the past." Perhaps the most unsettling development in the case came in 1965, when renovations at the Madison Parish Courthouse unearthed a sealed metal box hidden within a wall cavity. Inside was a man's gold pocket watch, inscribed with the initials TB, presumably Thomas Beauregard, and a folded paper containing what appeared to be a partial confession. The document, water-damaged and partially illegible, contained the following fragments: "Cannot carry this burden any longer. What we did to them was, God forgive me. The sound of her screaming his name as they dragged him. Tried to intervene, but blood on the library floor. River claimed them both that night. Payment to the men from Vicksburg to ensure they're never meant for it to her own daughter." The discovery was reported to the parish sheriff, but no formal investigation was launched. The items were photographed and subsequently transferred to the Louisiana State Archives. However, When historians attempted to access them in 1968, they were informed that no such materials existed in the collection. The photographs, too, have vanished from courthouse records. In 1966, Professor Wilson's research assistant, a graduate student named James Mercer, became obsessed with locating potential descendants of Eliza and Marcus. If the Memphis connection was valid, and they had indeed escaped north, their family line might have continued. Mercer's quest led him to Ohio, where he claimed to have found evidence of an Elizabeth and Matthew Taylor living in an abolitionist community near Cincinnati in the 1860s. According to Mercer's field notes, this Elizabeth Taylor, described in local church records as a fair-skinned woman with a southern accent, established a small school for formerly enslaved children. Her husband Matthew worked as a carpenter and was known for crafting elaborate wooden boxes adorned with magnolia carvings. They had 3 children: Sarah, born approximately 1854, Thomas, born 1856, and a youngest daughter, Mary, born 1859. What makes Mercer's discovery particularly compelling is a photograph he uncovered in the archives of an abolitionist newspaper. The grainy image, dated 1867, shows a group of teachers outside a small schoolhouse. Among them stands a woman bearing a striking resemblance to the sole surviving portrait of Eliza Beauregard. The caption identifies her simply as Mrs. E. Taylor. Mercer presented his findings to Professor Wilson with great excitement, but Wilson urged caution. The evidence was circumstantial at best, and making such a claim publicly without definitive proof would be academically irresponsible. Frustrated by what he perceived as unnecessary restraint, Mercer decided to continue his research independently. In April 1967, Mercer traveled to Tallulah to examine the site where the Beauregard plantation had stood. Local newspaper records indicate that he rented a boat and equipment for exploring the swampland northeast of town. He was last seen on the morning of April 12th, departing his motel room with research materials and camera equipment. 3 days later, when Mercer failed to return the boat and missed his scheduled flight back to New Orleans, authorities conducted a search. The boat was found drifting empty, with Mercer's equipment still aboard. His camera contained several exposed frames of film showing various locations in the swamp, including what appeared to be the depression noted in the 1958 land survey. The final photograph on the roll depicted what Mercer's journal, recovered from the boat, described as possible structural remains partially visible in the muddy water near the depression. The image is blurry, but some have interpreted it as showing the corner of a wooden box or small crate protruding from the sediment. Despite an extensive search, James Mercer's body was never found. The official report concluded that he had likely fallen overboard and drowned, his body carried away by the current. Professor Wilson, however, remained skeptical. In a letter to the Dean of Tulane University dated May 3, 1967, he wrote, "James was an experienced boatman who grew up on the Mississippi. The circumstances of his disappearance are troubling, particularly in light of the resistance we've encountered throughout this research. I cannot escape the feeling that getting too close to the truth about Eliza Beauregard and Marcus Kane remains dangerous, even after all these years." Wilson himself died of a heart attack 6 months later, leaving his research unfinished. His notes and materials were archived at Tulane, where they remained largely untouched until 1968, when the graduate student previously mentioned requested access to them. The student's abandoned dissertation proposal, still on file at Tulane, contained an intriguing hypothesis: that Eliza and Marcus had indeed attempted to escape, but had been captured and returned to the plantation. There, according to the proposal, they met a fate so disturbing that even in a society accustomed to violence, it was deemed necessary to obscure all record of it. The subsequent disappearance of Eliza Beauregard was a fabrication designed to preserve the Beauregard family's standing in a community that, while accepting of many cruelties, maintained certain boundaries that Thomas Beauregard had crossed in his rage. The student's research notes indicate that she had begun experiencing vivid nightmares after handling Eliza's journal. She described dreams in which she witnessed events at the Beauregard plantation through Eliza's eyes, including a final confrontation in the library where Marcus was captured by men hired from Vicksburg. In her dream journal, she wrote, "I could feel the blow to my head, taste blood in my mouth as father dragged me up the stairs. The last thing I saw was Marcus fighting against 4 men as they forced him outside. I knew then that I would never see him again." Whether these dreams represented historical intuition, an overactive imagination, or something more difficult to explain, they eventually led to the student's withdrawal from the university. Her current whereabouts are unknown. In 1968, a descendant of the Beauregard family named Charlotte Beauregard Wilson, no relation to Professor Wilson, petitioned the Madison Parish courts to have the case of Eliza's disappearance officially closed. Her petition cited the unnecessary and harmful speculation surrounding her ancestors' reputation and the distress caused to living family members by continued interest in the case. The court granted her request, and a formal declaration was issued stating that Eliza Beauregard had died on or about August 30th, 1852, by misadventure in the swamplands of Madison Parish. No mention was made of Marcus Kane. Charlotte Beauregard Wilson subsequently donated funds for the construction of a small memorial garden in Tallulah, dedicated to all souls lost to time and circumstance. A simple stone marker bears the inscription, "For those remembered and those forgotten. May they find the peace in eternity that eluded them in life." Local residents report that Charlotte visits the garden annually on August 30th, where she sits alone for precisely 1 hour before departing. She brings with her 2 items, a magnolia blossom, which she leaves at the base of the marker, and a book, which she reads from quietly during her vigil. The book, according to the groundskeeper who has observed this ritual for over a decade, appears to be a well-worn copy of Jane Eyre. When approached by a journalist in 1969 about her interest in the case, Charlotte replied only, "Some debts can never be repaid. Some wounds never heal. The least we can do is acknowledge their existence." Whether Charlotte knows more about her ancestors' fate than has been publicly revealed remains a matter of speculation. She has consistently refused all requests for interviews regarding the Beauregard family history, and in her will, filed with the Madison Parish Courthouse in 1968, she stipulated that upon her death, all family papers in her possession are to be cremated without examination. The case of Eliza Beauregard and Marcus Kane represents a peculiar confluence of historical record and historical silence. The facts, what few can be verified, tell us little. The silences, the gaps, the inconsistencies and the disappearances of people, of documents, of evidence, perhaps tell us more. What we know with certainty is this. In the summer of 1852, in the small town of Tallulah, Louisiana, something happened that people found necessary to conceal. That concealment continues in various forms to this day. Whether motivated by shame, by fear, or by some lingering sense of complicity, the silence surrounding these events has shown remarkable endurance. The true horror of this story may not lie in what happened to Eliza and Marcus, but in our inability to ever know with certainty. Horror thrives in ambiguity, in the spaces between what we can see and what we can only imagine. The mind, when confronted with fragments, will inevitably attempt to construct a whole, often creating something more terrifying than reality could provide. Did Eliza and Marcus escape to build a new life in the North, as Josephine Taylor's family history suggests? Were they captured and killed, their bodies disposed of in the dark waters of the Madison Parish swamps, as James Mercer's research might indicate? Or is the truth something else entirely, something no researcher has yet uncovered or imagined? The Bogard plantation is long gone. The swamp continues its slow, inexorable reclamation of the land. The descendants of those who might have known the truth are scattered or deceased. All that remains are questions, theories, and the persistent feeling that something important has been left unsaid. For those who have attempted to piece together this puzzle, Professor Wilson, James Mercer, Dr. Montgomery, the unnamed graduate student, the search for answers has often led to more questions, and in some cases, to personal tragedy. It is as if the story itself resists completion, as if some force actively works to maintain its mysteries. In 1968, shortly before the microfilm copies of Eliza's journal were archived, a Tulane University librarian made a curious discovery. On the final page of the journal, previously believed to be blank, faint impressions were visible when the page was held at a certain angle to the light. These impressions, apparently made by the pressure of a pen on a now missing subsequent page, formed partial words and phrases: beneath the library floor, loose board behind the hearth, and most distinctly, we will not be found. Whether these represent Eliza's final written words or merely the imaginative interpretation of a librarian too long immersed in a compelling mystery, they added yet another layer to a story already rich with ambiguity. The town of Tallulah has changed significantly since 1852. The plantation economy has given way to other industries. The swamps have been partially drained, the forests partially cleared. Yet certain aspects of the past remain stubbornly present. Old family names still carry weight. Certain topics are still approached with caution, if approached at all. At the local historical society, an exhibit on antebellum Madison Parish makes no mention of the Bogard family or the disappearance that once captivated the region's attention. When asked about this omission, the curator offers a practiced response. We focus on representative experiences rather than individual cases. The subject is politely but firmly closed. In the county records room, the volume containing property transactions for August through October 1852 is conspicuously missing, allegedly lost during a flood in the 1920s. The Madison Journal archives for the same period show signs of tampering, pages carefully removed, entries redacted. Even the landscape itself seems complicit in the concealment. The precise location of the Bogard plantation house is disputed among local historians, with at least 3 different sites claimed as the true setting of Eliza's disappearance. The swamp where James Mercer vanished while searching for evidence is now part of a private hunting reserve, inaccessible without permission that is rarely granted. It is as if the story of Eliza Bogard and Marcus Kane has been systematically erased, not just from official records, but from collective memory. Yet paradoxically, this very erasure has ensured a kind of immortality. In the absence of resolution, their story continues to haunt the margins of history, emerging periodically to capture the imagination of a new researcher, or to trouble the dreams of those sensitive to the echoes of the past. Perhaps this is fitting. In life, both Eliza and Marcus existed in the spaces between established categories, she as a woman whose education had placed her at odds with her society's expectations, he as an enslaved man whose intellect and abilities defied the dehumanizing system that sought to contain him. In whatever fate they met, together or separately, they continue to elude definitive classification. For those who visit Tallulah today, there are few visible reminders of this story. The memorial garden, with its enigmatic marker, the courthouse where records have disappeared, the swamplands that may or may not conceal centuries-old secrets. Yet something intangible remains, a quality to the air, perhaps, especially on humid August evenings when sounds carry strangely across the water. Locals say that if you stand at the edge of the swamp as twilight deepens into night, and if you listen very carefully in the moment when the cicadas fall silent, you might hear something, not quite a voice, not quite a whisper, but a sound that suggests both presence and absence, both remembrance and forgetting, a sound that might be a name, or might be the wind, or might be something else entirely. In that ambiguous sound, perhaps, lies the true legacy of what happened in Tallulah in the summer of 1852, a story that, despite all attempts to silence it, refuses to be entirely forgotten. And so it remains, suspended between history and legend, between memory and mystery, the most disturbing slave mystery in Tallulah history, disturbing not for what we know, but for all that we do not and cannot know. A reminder that the past is never truly past, that silence speaks volumes, and that some stories, once begun, have no true ending. In the words written in Charlotte Beauregard Wilson's visitor's book at the Memorial Garden on August 30th, 1969, by an unknown hand, "For Eliza and Marcus, may they have found in death the freedom that life denied them. And may the truth, long buried, eventually rise, as truth always will." The book has since disappeared from the garden's records. The handwriting has never been identified. And in Tallulah, the silence continues, broken only by the occasional whisper of a name carried on the night air, a sound that might be human or might be simply the wind moving through ancient cypress trees that have witnessed everything and revealed nothing.